Think you need a pricey Dutch oven to make amazing sourdough bread? Think again. There's a simpler, cheaper way that works just as well. No heavy pots, no extra storage space needed. Dutch ovens can be expensive, bulky, and difficult to handle when hot. But what if I told you you can get the same crispy crust and soft interior using one commonly found kitchen item? That's right, no fancy equipment required. Today, I'll show you exactly how to bake incredible sourdough bread without a Dutch oven, using a method that's affordable, space-saving, and easy for anyone to try. Let's get started. Hi friend, I'm making a sourdough loaf today and I wanted to show you how I do that without a Dutch oven while still getting a Dutch oven effect. Before I get started, I wanted to show you that my sourdough is at the ready. I don't know if you can see, but it is domed and it's still actively rising, which means I haven't hit peak and I'm not falling. This is a really good time to use it. Once it starts falling, sometimes the sourness can really come out. If you don't like that sourness, try to catch it while it's still domed. If you're at this stage and you're not quite ready to make your sourdough, put it in the fridge and use it a little bit later. I do have this on a scale. I am going to weigh things, but I'll give you both sets of measurements for what I am doing. That way you don't need to have any special equipment like a scale, although I highly recommend getting a scale. I am using vital wheat gluten. This is optional. I use it because I have it for making all-purpose flour into bread flour, but it does help strengthen bread flour a little bit more. I added 2 tablespoons of vital wheat gluten. I added about 1/3 of a cup of whole wheat flour. You can add more whole wheat flour, but whole wheat flour is rather abrasive and it can cut your gluten strands and create a slightly different texture with less rise, hence why it seems dense. Finally, bread flour. I have done this with all-purpose. Yes, you can use all-purpose alone or with vital wheat gluten to create bread flour. All-purpose flour alone will get you a slightly different texture, a softer texture. I'm adding about 3 cups of bread flour. It will depend if you're a little more heavy-handed like I am or if you're lighter with it. I have 350 milliliters of water. That equates to 1.5 cups. And finally, starter. The amount of starter you add is kind of going to depend on the temperature of your house. It's cold in my house. I'm going to put this in the oven with the oven light on, and that will help create a warmer environment. I'm going to add 150 grams of this to compensate for the cooler house temperatures. I'd use 100 grams if it were warmer. This is an adjustment point that can be used for timing longer fermentations, such as an overnight fermentation. Add less starter so as not to overproof. It will ferment faster with more starter, that's for sure. So it really depends on what kind of product and timeline you're looking for, and how sour you like it. It looks like 100 grams is about half a cup, so 150 grams should be about 3/4 of a cup. I don't have much left, but this is plenty to start the next batch. At this point, you have a choice of either throwing everything into the bowl and making your dough, or doing an autolyse followed by the starter, and finally adding the salt last. I will do the longer version to show you all the steps, but if you choose to throw everything together, give it a little bit of a bowl kneading until it comes together, then skip over to the stretch and folds. I'm going to just put in the water portion of this to get the autolyse going. This will help hydrate the flour and begin the formation of the gluten network, all while sitting and resting. When doing dough in the winter, one of the tricks is to use much hotter water as your starting point, and that will help you get your dough to the right temperature range when you add your sourdough. Warm dough will ferment faster than cold dough. Right now, my sourdough is at room temperature, which for me is about 65 right now. My flour is also at room temperature. My water, it was warm from the tap, but it wasn't super hot. It will create a sort of warm-ish dough. If I'd used 100-degree water, that would have gotten me started a lot faster, because my dough would have been a lot warmer when I added the sourdough. But I didn't want to kill my starter while trying to measure how much I put in. A warmer dough will have a faster fermentation, and a lot of this, again, goes back to how sour you want your sourdough to be. Some people, they don't like sourdough for a reason. It's because it's sour. And the stuff at the store, it's artificially sour. It's not real sourdough. They're just putting in sour flavor. In order to prevent sticking, I will use a wet hand. It doesn't prevent all sticking, but it can get you started at least. I'm going to wet my hand and pat the surface, and it just gives it a little moisture on the surface to help prevent a skin from forming. I'll get this covered with a tea towel that I wet with hot water. It'll help warm it up and keep the humidity higher underneath. That's really what we're looking for, is to maintain a humidity level so that it doesn't dry out and cause the skin to form. For sourdough starter and maintenance, this will kind of depend on how frequently you use your starter. I like to feed my sourdough at a 2 to 6 to 8 ratio when it's been sitting for a while to help reduce the amount of sour that can form. By using a small amount of the sourdough starter with a larger amount of water and flour, it can help to dilute the sourness. If you've had your sourdough sitting around for a little too long, you can do that once or twice and it'll help get rid of some of that extra sour flavor and sort of bring it back to a sweeter flavor. I have in the past done my starters by feel. I just went for a certain texture and it worked perfectly fine for me. Don't feel like you need a scale to maintain a sourdough starter. This comes together as a stiff dough. If you do the 20-60-80, that's the ratio I use, 2-6-8, it'll take some time for it to double. I did this overnight, and first thing this morning it was nicely domed and ready to go. Different starter consistencies will have different flavors. You need to play around and figure out which one you like. I have heard that the more liquidy ones tend to be a little sweeter, but I think once you have made your starter sweeter, you can go back to a stiffer one if you want. I use a Sharpie to mark the level of my starter to let me know where I've risen over time. And then I just have these fermentation lids that I put on them, and it just keeps things from falling into it. That's basic sourdough starter maintenance. If you need a video on how to make a starter, I can make one for you. Just drop me a comment. Hey, if you're really enjoying this video and want to see more recipes like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I'd love to have you here for the next one. I have let this go about an hour. You can see it has developed some gluten. It is now time to get my sourdough in there. It is just a matter of getting in there with your hands and just mixing it up as best you can. I will still need to add salt to this, so it will have 2 opportunities to get mixed in, hopefully well, but it's just a messy process. This will feel like it falls apart before it comes back together again. You'll just have to bear with it and just kind of knead it in the bowl. I have a recipe for more of a sandwich style loaf. It's enriched with milk and butter in it. It's a very nice loaf. I really like it. I make it with a sourdough starter, or regular yeast, or with a poolish. So if you don't have sourdough, but you want that sourdough effect, you could make a poolish. If you want to see how any of those work, just let me know in the comments below and I can pull together a video on that. In the end, I'm just kneading it in the bowl. It's a lot less messy. I mean, it's messy, but it's a lot less messy than doing it on the counter. You can also do a kind of slap and fold technique in the bowl. It can help a bit more when it comes together to do that. So you pick it up, you want to slap it down and fold it over itself. Time is on my side, so this doesn't need to be perfectly kneaded. I'm going to let this sit for another half hour or so, then I'm going to add my salt. It has been half an hour and I'm going to put my salt in. This is about 1 teaspoon of salt. I'll wet my hand for this part, both to help the salt dissolve and to prevent some sticking. I'm going to press it in as best I can. You're going to have to feel for grains of salt to make sure that the salt is completely dissolved into the dough. You don't want to have chunks of salt. When I feel like I've gotten it in a good spot, I'm going to knead it until it comes together. I do find that sometimes, because of the extra moisture, it will create like a little pocket in there, and then the pocket will bust out of the bottom, and it'll get really shaggy. You have to get it past that stage and then bring it back together again. That way everything has been fully incorporated. I can still feel a couple of little salt crystals, so I'm going to work it a bit more. See how it's starting to shag apart? I'll get it past that stage. At this point, I have developed quite a bit of gluten. If I really wanted to, I could probably just leave it. But I do want to give it a couple of stretches and folds because I do want to make sure that the salt gets completely incorporated. The stretches and folds will also help make the temperature more uniform throughout the whole dough, which will help the fermentation. Nice and smooth. It is sticking to me a little bit because the gluten is not fully formed. I will cover it again with a damp cloth and put it back in my oven. This is stretch and fold number 1. I will show you 3 different ways of doing stretch and folds. The first is a true stretch and fold. I'm going to stretch it up and fold it over. Stretch it up, fold it over. You're going to see how each time I lift it up, it tightens more. Don't force it. You don't want to rip it. Just go as far as you feel it'll go and then fold it onto itself. I go around a few times just to get a nice tight dough, which helps with the gluten. I like to flip it over and round it. I am doing this while my hands are wet to help prevent some of the sticking. A nice tight dough will also prevent some sticking. I'll let it sit for another half hour, then I'll show you a different style of stretch and fold. As you can see, this has had a chance to relax and flatten down a little bit. I'm going to do the second type of folding, which is a coil fold. This one you'll need both of your hands to be wet. I like to loosen it up from the sides and then lift it up until it releases, and then set it down onto itself. Flip it around, lift it up. Sometimes you have to pick it up twice to get the coil under itself. This one is a little bit more gentle on the dough. If you have a delicate dough, this can be a good one for it. You just want to sort of pick it up in the middle and let gravity do its thing, and then fold it onto itself. Once I've done it a couple of times, I like to go around and round it up as a ball again. This just helps tighten everything up. I will give that another half hour and show you one more. As you can see, it has relaxed down a little bit. This is my last stretch and fold, and this one is a lamination technique I've seen other people use. It's okay, it's a bit messy. You need to have a clean counter for it. Turn your dough out and gently stretch it out as much as you can. I don't have a lot of space here, so I'm not going to be able to stretch it out very far, but you'll want to stretch the dough as much as the dough will give you. I did wet my counter a little bit beforehand. Tug it gently into a large square or round, and then you want to letter fold it, roll it up, and form it into a ball. It does take a little bit of space, but it does help layer up the gluten strands and create a nice, neat ball. This goes back in my bowl with the cover, and I'm going to let this go until it has almost doubled. For me, doubling is pretty much to the top of the bowl. I'll let it go just below that so the dome is at the top. This will take some time depending on the temperature of your house, or the temperature of your oven if you're doing it like I am. You could do this in a dehydrator, but do make sure you cover this really well. You want the heat from the dehydrator, not the drying effects from the dehydrator. Otherwise, you're going to get a skin, and that's not good for rising. I'm going to dust the surface with a little bit of flour and turn it out. I want to gather the sides into the center and then turn it over and sort of tuck it under. This is a pre-shape. I'm going to let this sit and rest for about 10 minutes covered. You can put this in whatever you want to cook it in. If you're going to do a loaf like I am, put it in a loaf pan. If you want to do a bowl, or one of those round ones, you could use a tea towel lined mixing bowl. I'm going to get this flipped over. If you put it in a mixing bowl or a banneton to help with your shaping, you want to put it seam side up, because when you take it out, you're going to flip it over and your seam will then be on the bottom and hidden. If you are putting it in the loaf pan, you want to keep the seam to the bottom because you're going to be putting it in with the seam down and let it rise in the loaf pan. I am going to fold this very similar to how we did the laminating technique earlier. I'm going to roll it and push with my thumbs a little. Roll it, push with my thumbs a little. I'm going to get a little bit of flour on the bottom here, and I'm just going to sort of move it back and forth on the counter to help seal the edges. You want to try to use a light touch. It will be a little tacky. Use a little flour to help. I'm going to gently pick this up, and I'm going to sort of squeeze it together a little as I put it in. The loaf pan is not a special equipment in my opinion. The banneton is. So go ahead and put it directly in your loaf pan. I'll put it in a plastic bag, and I'll puff it up with a little bit of air. It'll help keep the humidity in there, but it will prevent it from drying out in the fridge. You can do this all in one day, in one step, but I find that I sometimes get large air pockets, and it creates crust separation, which is a little unpleasant. That's why I've actually been trying to document what I've been doing, because I feel like I might be doing something wrong, and it's hard to tell without sort of going through the steps and figuring it out. I always do it in the fridge now, and I find that helps keep the big, huge air holes and crust separation down to a minimum. Let's get this into the pan. This works the same if you are using a mixing bowl. Put a little bit of rice flour on the bottom. It helps dry it up a little bit from the moisture that built up in the bag. I have my bread pan here that has been sprayed with nonstick spray. I'm going to use one of those bread slings. I just made this out of some silicone by the roll. You can also use parchment paper. This is fresh from the fridge. It's still really cold. Some people like to warm theirs up a little bit. I haven't tried that. It will start proofing some more. It's just personal preference. It's time to score this. If you have a sharp knife, use that. If you don't really have a good sharp knife, use a serrated knife and just make slashes going across and it'll puff up. It'll be a little less destructive to the way your dough is rising if you do it that way. If you can, just get a razor blade, and if you know someone who's got a 3D printer, you can print out a lamb. They're pretty quick and easy to print. I'm going to score at a slight angle, not too steep. Here's where the Dutch oven substitute comes into play. Essentially, we are skipping the Dutch oven or any steam injection. Most home bakers use a Dutch oven, but not everyone has a large Dutch oven. You can put another bread pan on top to help trap the steam, but again, not everyone has another bread pan. I didn't have another bread pan until just recently. We are going to use tinfoil to trap in the steam. This replaces spraying water into your oven and potentially shattering your glass door, or trying to pour boiling water into your oven. Place your bread pan on top and pinch the corners in. This is just to get your basic shape. Take your bread pan out and flip the foil over onto your pan. The foil can be reused a few times, but once it starts ripping, it does start creating air holes. Once it's on top, crimp it down around the edges and bake it that way. This will help keep all the steam trapped in there, and it will prevent some of the premature hardening of the crust, allowing it to give a nice big oven spring. I like to use the heavy-duty foil because it just holds up a little bit better if you want to use it for long term. If you're just going to do a one and done, go right ahead with whatever foil you have. I have my oven set to 425 right now, and I'm going to put it in covered for 35 minutes. I'll drop the temperature to 400. At that point, I can uncover it or leave it covered for a softer, paler crust. It really depends, again, on what you personally are looking for when you are making bread. It has taken me a little bit of time to trial and error out the temperature for my particular oven. Here we go, fresh from the oven. I left the foil on for this one, and it does turn out a lot paler. If I remove the foil for the last 10 minutes, it crisps up a little bit more. You can see from the side it looks really nice. I will obviously wait for this to cool off before slicing it to show you what the inside looks like. But here you go, no Dutch oven needed. And if you don't have a loaf pan, no problem. Use the mixing bowl, turn out the bowl onto a cookie sheet, and dome it with foil. And here is the bread. I like to wrap mine in a tea towel as it cools to help keep the crust soft. If you like it crusty, then just leave it uncovered. This pairs really well with my softened butter. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. If you give this recipe a try, let me know how the tinfoil technique worked out for you. And thanks for watching.